So I wanted to welcome everybody to another segment of the Soffer Longevity Podcast, where we really work at making this feel like a doctor's lounge where we can have a variety of different perspectives. So I am a board-certified cardiovascular disease specialist, a cardiologist for 35 years, and I'm going to be joined today by our co-host, Dr. Safa Mlad, who is a board-certified, not only family practitioner, but longevity and functional medicine specialist. And we're going to talk about all the evidence-based information that's swirling around the internet and make it useful for today. And make it hopefully fun for everybody to listen to. And I wanted to thank our sponsors, Longevity AI, the database that keeps all of this information together for us in our practices and practices all over the world right now. So thanks to the Longevity AI folks. And we're going to discuss some really interesting topics today regarding things like Rapamycin and its benefits in human longevity, Berberine and its evidence-based benefits, as well as Metformin, and why a lot of people are taking them to basically live longer, as well as sort of a discussion of a new book that's out there called, I think, The Body Electric, which talks about the need for movement every 30 minutes. We need about 5 minutes of movement. So those are the discussions that we'll have, plus a couple of other little fun tidbits. So remember, subscribe below, and thank you for joining us. So it's another day at the doctor's lounge with my favorite functional medicine specialist, probably doctor in general, my personal doctor also, Dr. Safa Mlad, who has a lot of interesting things to talk about today, where we decided we were going to really start with maybe Rapamycin. Let's rap about Rapamycin, which is getting a lot of discussion swirling around the internet, as we like to say, that is super interesting. So tell me your perspective on Rapamycin.
Well, I thought going over the history of Rapamycin would be very interesting, because how it was found was a very interesting story. So I don't know if you know it.
Do tell.
Okay. So Rapamycin was actually found on Easter Island, so under the Moai. So the original scientist was a Canadian, and he was thinking, why did not the population of Easter Island not get tetanus? So he got a bunch of soil samples and was trying to figure out,
When was this?
1960s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so they're going around trying to figure out why the population doesn't have tetanus. And then in that whole process, they found out that, the tetanus was really just not on the island, and that's why they weren't getting it. But then they found this other bacteria, and that turned out to be the basis of how Rapamycin got discovered. So
what is, I understand that it is a unique thing to Easter Island, but what did they think it was? And
so they found this bacteria that had very powerful antifungal properties. And then when it actually went through a couple of phases getting it to actually be manufactured, but it was the antifungal properties that were first studied, and then they found that it is a powerful immunosuppressive. So that's how Rapamycin became the medication for transplants. As an immunosuppressant.
As an immunosuppressive coming through Easter Island while they're looking for something else. It's such a common theme where we have so many drugs that came out of other studies, like we talked about in one of our previous segments about a cardiovascular study that ended up with what's now becoming a sort of a longevity potential. Then there's the Gila monster, that big lizard that seemingly is not hungry for long periods of time, was then found to have in its saliva the GLP-1s that were used today, the Manjaros and whatnot, the Ozempics. So It is amazing how we stumble into things in medicine, and it makes sense. You're experimenting, and by definition, you're not sure, and you find things, and that's why every study sort of gets kept in the back of our minds for other studies. So that's interesting. Okay, so rapamycin is getting a lot of interest for folks who are listening as a longevity pill that seems to work at the very least in animal models, particularly mice, I believe, to make them live longer.
Yes, and that study was done in 2009, where they did trying to figure out, if what rapamycin can do, and they lived almost 30% longer than the mice that were not taking it. So that was like the first kind of breakthrough of trying to figure out if rapamycin can work for longevity. So it was interesting that they found the drug first before actually knowing the mechanism.
Interesting. So how is it being used in humans?
So they're using, years ago, they weren't really sure of what was happening. So they found that it was improving mTOR. So so that's that mechanism that they actually found after. So they called it the mechanistic target of rapamycin. So they named that pathway after the rapamycin because it was the lock that they had the key for. Yeah.
In animals.
In animals, yes.
So mTOR was discovered in animals
first.
around rapamycin to extend their lives by 30%.
Yes.
So that would be, based on our numbers, you'd be well into your hundreds if that were to work in humans.
Exactly. So once they found the mechanism of how it works, then they started experimenting with different dosages and stuff, because the rapamycin that they used for immunotherapy or for immunosuppression are a lot higher doses.
So clinically, in the leap from animals to humans, which is extraordinarily big leap, sometimes never makes it. Sometimes we have to kind of go back to the drawing board and decide different levels of dosages, bioavailability, the LD50s, whatever it is, the dosages that we need to get down. Where are we with that right now?
So there is, the University of Arizona is going to be starting a study. They have about 720 participants at this point, and they're going to be following them for years to see which dose is the best for a human.
It makes sense that if you're doing a study to show people live an extra 30 years, it's going to take it's going to take a while. That time to actually get any kind of a double-blind, because placebo-controlled RCT, randomized control testing. So it is. It's sad that it's going to take that long, but it's exciting that we'll have markers along the way, and maybe that's why a lot of our colleagues. I actually have a couple of very esteemed colleagues that are already taking rapamycin at hopeful doses.
Well, that's the thing, is just trying to get this dose right. So that, because the problem is if you take too much rapamycin and then you start having the side effects. So it can increase your hemoglobin A1C, can increase your triglycerides, you can get mouth sores. So the side effects are not the best if you don't get the dose right.
Right. So it comes down to this sort of thing we hear swirling. I love to say that. I don't know why. Swirling around the internet. But this idea of microdosing seems to be everyone's solution to the unknown, right? So, well, if it's just a little bit, I'll be fine. I used to see that a lot with statins, which used to anger me, because I'm like, look, we know exactly the dose of a statin will work for you in large population studies, and you're probably a person within that large population, and you will have less heart attack, stroke, and death if you take this dose. Well, I just want to take a little bit of it. Well, that's now ineffective because as a principal investigator in numerous studies, including today, we know that we get a lot of data for the bioavailability, like what's going to work in humans. Then we break it down into 2 or 3 different ones usually, and then we test those to see which is optimal. And therefore people are like, well, that's great, you did all that work. I'm still going to take a tiny dose. Okay, but then that's placebo. It's not probably going to work at all. So people are playing with rapamycin, it sounds like right now, not knowing what the actual right dose would be for a human, knowing what the wrong dose is. So obviously you get a mouse sore, some sort of issue that's similar to what we've seen with other immunosuppressive medications, right?
That's, yeah.
So do you prescribe it? Are you involved with it? What do you think about it on a personal level?
On a personal level, I think for the right patient, it would be incredibly helpful, especially if you're dosing it correctly and you're checking them. So you're making sure that their labs are not, getting out of whack. Yeah.
Well, just to let the audience know too, when you and I started first working together, you as my doctor, we took a couple of hundred blood tests, and we also did some genetic tests and some urine tests, and we did some testing. Within that, it gives you a much better picture of what's going on, and we use our software to kind of keep it all very organized, which without AI software, I don't think it's possible. I just do not think that's humanly possible. So we have this software that keeps it, the testing that does it, then you give in certain situations where you think the risk-benefit analysis works out, you give these functional medical decisions.
Interventions, pretty much.
Interventions.
Yeah. And then you measure to see what your intervention did.
But the key is with what you're doing versus what I'm doing. When someone comes to me, typically they are at risk or already have atherosclerosis.
Yes.
That's the main thing that a cardiologist does.
I'm trying to catch them years before. So your risk-benefit, though, ratio is much different. In other words, they're already feeling great. They go, I just want to feel great longer. They say that health is the new wealth, right? So someone who's doing pretty well and they feel pretty well, they feel like they want to just extend that period. You want to do no harm. That's not only the oath we take, but it's, the risk-benefit analysis. So if there's any harm that comes from it, well, it better be reversible. And if it's any harm, really, and you don't know the benefit, then your risk-benefit scale goes wonky. It goes, well, that's not good. So we're always looking for, you and I, things that are very, very safe. We talked about ad nauseum, and we'll probably continue to talk about creatine because that actually has a very high safety profile. Therefore, all the benefits are exceptional. Yes.
So do you find that rapamycin might be something along those lines if the dosage is correct?
I think so, because of that whole mTOR pathway. So it's really what we're trying to do is mimic physical activity and fasting in a medication form. I mean, obviously,
the benefits from physical activity.
Obviously, if we do the physical activity, that's number one. But if we can't get to those levels, then
it's like with the GLP-1s. Like people that are on GLP-1s that don't exercise get much less benefit than people that do exercise. People that are on the GLP-1s that don't, like, kind of make some dietary habits, like maybe some intermittent fasting or switching to the Mediterranean diet, things like that also get much less benefit statistically. So in this case scenario with rapamycin, you're not doing it instead of exercise. You're just trying to look at the blood markers that exercise positively affects and find something that tops it off a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So where is it? Is it commonly available? Is it like one of those things that like a compound pharmacy does, or is it?
It's a generic pill. So
it's a generic pill.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it can be just ordered, from the pharmacy.
Is that maybe why we don't hear about it? Because, the quintessential big pharma isn't making a bunch of money on it, so they don't have the marketing budgets to then put it on TV ads.
I think with all the money that they made for the immunosuppressive, they actually were also using it in cardiac stents.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure they've...
As immunosuppressive. Yeah. So So... But the money's been made. It's not now it's generic. Once something goes generic, you don't hear about it as much, right? Because it's off. Now they can get it for new indications. There's a way that they could, but
I don't think longevity is going to be classified as a disease. So
right. Well, interesting you say that, but there are a lot of people pushing that aging is the number one disease that we have, and that therefore should be treated and classified as a disease.
Yes.
So anti-aging or longevity might one day be a part of that to a degree, but we're ways away from that. We're just trying to get regular insurance to pay for heart attacks at this point, So, all right. So rapamycin at an individualized dosing regimen based on some blood testing and a functional medicine doctor's purvey, which is a little bit different because some of those testing, it's not expensive, but it's not usually covered by insurance, and therefore you have to be part of a program, which is why we set up the program here. We set it up for our patients that have been asking for it. I know for myself, for my friends and family, and obviously, the listeners that end up coming to our sort of our longevity program here. But in the end, it's building that drumbeat of we can do some testing. We can then make some interventions that are coming to us, that may take 30 years to figure out, but doesn't mean we can't begin them now, especially with these generic and approved medications. The only thing is they're off-label.
Yes.
So you need to have a doctor that understands the off-label usage, has a certain amount of experience, and the patients understand that we're not entirely sure what the right dosage is. So there is a certain amount of trial and error that goes into
But
this.
that's why they're monitored. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so happy, to have met you and to see you go through what is really cutting edge medicine or wellness. Because my goal is to be not elderly one day. Welderly. So having just turned 60, I have never been more focused on that for me and for my patients. And, I get a lot of questions as to when do you start? And I would say in your 30s right now, because these things take, and I reiterate this quite a bit, they're the three reasons we get older. It's the cardiovascular issues, so atherosclerosis, the cancer-related issues that get a lot of us and make us sicker and older, and neurodegenerative diseases. All three of those things that are the major problems that humans have are a balance between the immune system. So the immune system, works really hard to stop us from having cancers, but if it works cross-reacts on that, then you start getting atherosclerosis, and then kind of everything in between in the neurodegenerative world. So the inflammaging, the immune-related aging has a very specific biologic clock that we're actually able to measure. You measured it on me. It made a lot of sense to me how my immune system was related to my aging and how to kind of keep it in balance.
Yes.
And rapamycin may push that balance towards a slower aging.
Yes. Yeah. It would actually be an interesting experiment to see if because your pace of aging was really good. So if you ever want to be an experiment.
I am. I think if I do it, I'll do it on the podcast and show everybody, not if I do it, when I do it. Because I do want to do it. I'm not just, listen, you have to get the right, you have to have a good Mediterranean diet. You have to have 150 minutes of both resistance and aerobic exercise. These are the minimums. You have to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. You have to track your sleep, make sure it's all good. Same time every night, the cold room, absence of distractions and lights, that sort of thing. Okay, you do those major things, then you can begin with adding some of the additional elements like GLP-1s, whether it's microdosed or regular dosed. Typically regular dosed is better, and then everything else we're talking about. So the addition of, for instance, rapamycin, which I am strongly considering. I'm waiting for a couple of more bits of information for me, but I think that we will announce it, and I will certainly consider giving it a go. And as you're doing, you've been very vocal about some of the things that you do personally. So that's been terrific. I don't want to go too much on the side thing because we want to kind of keep the segment to some of the things you and I discussed. So let's move from rapamycin. I think we've kind of covered that for now. It's an exciting thing, maybe one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting anti-aging regimens out there. Let's talk about one of the lesser known ones, which is berberine. Tell me about berberine.
So berberine is touted to be kind of the pseudo or the replacement for metformin, and some people have been saying it's the herbal Ozempic because it also kind of affects the GLP-1 production. So berberine has that effect of affecting the AMPK pathway. So that kind of tells your cells, oh, I don't have like enough fuel, start going into like recovery mode. So berberine kind of works on that same pathway as metformin does.
So and metformin has, other than rapamycin, probably has the most amount of hype around it as an anti-aging alternative. I know famously Dr. Sinclair at Harvard in his lab has been studying it for many years. He's been on it for many years. He looks great. His numbers apparently are great. And there's a lot of data to suggest that metformin is something we all should consider, and I know you consider it on everybody, as do a lot of traditional endocrinologists. And
it's number one for pre-diabetics. That's like the number one prescribed medication.
And also great risk-benefit safety profile. So it's very, very safe. So you're saying that berberine mimics
metformin.
But the difference with metformin is you get very specific dosing understanding. What about berberine?
Berberine is a little different because its absorption is not as well. So like it's not very well absorbed through the GI tract. So that's the problem with berberine, is trying to figure out how we can get different formulations that will be absorbed better. So yeah, we definitely know the pharmacokinetics of metformin really well, but berberine's just a little different.
So it's kind of like, it reminds me of red rice yeast. So people, there are a lot of people out there that are a little skeptical about big pharma. They don't want to take a statin because it was developed by big pharma, even though a lot of it is generic right now. But they would like, well, I want to take a natural version, and red rice yeast has statin
properties.
Statin in it. It basically is a statin. It's just sort of grown naturally, more naturally than in a lab. The problem with growing something naturally, though, and I tell my patients that, is I don't know the dosing. So I don't know the LD50. I don't know the pharmacokinetics around it. So I'm kind of guessing. Now, I can follow their cholesterol. They're like, listen, my cholesterol looks great. In this case, usually just LDL. It's not really an ApoB or an Lp(a) affecting medication, but I've had to deal with people who take the red rice yeast and just try and follow their parameters. Usually we end up with a higher dose, a more bioavailable dose of a statin, or one of the PCKS9 inhibitors like a Repatha, that are very clear and do a very aggressive job of bringing those numbers down. So you're saying that berberine has that same kind of, it kind of works, but you would look at what parameter would you look for berberine?
So for hemoglobin A1C, insulin, and it actually does have lipid lowering properties. So you also check your lipids.
Interesting. So you could watch that as well. That's great.
And it has a GLP-1 effect. So some people do lose weight on it.
Nice little side effect.
Exactly.
Nice little side effect. It reminds me of the early days when I was in Cedars-Sinai, and we were involved in some of the early Viagra studies, and we were looking at it for pulmonary hypertension. So we were heavy into, it was a cardiovascular center of excellence, still is, maybe one of the top ones in the country, and we were involved in a study, and we were like, well, it doesn't seem to be doing as much for the heart as we would like, but man, are people happy? What's going on here? You know, and that was how we found that it actually worked for erectile dysfunction. So it's all accidents in medicine. Yes. It's so many accidents that happen during studies. I'm involved in a study now looking at Lp(a) with some of the major pharmaceutical companies and what we can do for people with Lp(a) or other cholesterol parameters. And we found already a couple of funny things that happen with the drugs that we're looking at, and where that will go from, who knows? You know, it's not always the intended endpoint that we get, but what surprisingly happens as long as really smart people are looking at it. And that's why we have these institutional review boards, and we have other people looking at stuff, and that's also why it's so expensive to study stuff, because we're studying everything about it.
Yes.
You know? All right. So we kind of covered a bit about Berberine, which makes sense. So it's similar to sort of metformin. It's got some GLP-1 type qualities. It's a natural substance, and that's right for many people, where other people want more specific medications and so forth. So that's where it goes into your personalization capacity, which you give uniquely to people, particularly in your longevity portion of your practice, which is, you know, a little different than the regular part of your practice.
Yeah, because I get to spend time with them.
Right. For that, it's a membership, and you've democratized it, made it very affordable for folks. But in the end, you need the extra time. You need the extra testing. Yes. And that's something that I've been blessed to be a part of with you. So we covered those two topics. There was a third topic you were interested in discussing as well.
Well, it was just metformin. That was the other one.
But the specific about metformin.
The specifics. So we think we kind of went over what metformin does.
Well, I wanted to talk about metformin just a little bit more because, and then I did have something I wanted to discuss.
Yes.
But metformin, you know, is maybe not the best anti-diabetic drug. I know my father had been on it for years. It was useful. Sometimes when you're diabetic, you really need to have more aggressive forms, all the way leading up into insulin. But as its anti-aging property that seemed to have also improved the cognitive dysfunction that happens with some folks, where they start getting the tiny vessels of the brain that start to become problematic. I think metformin could be beneficial. Go ahead.
So that's so the way that metformin actually works is that it's kind of like a inhibitor of complex 1 in the electron transport chain. So it almost like poisons that complex, so that it sends signals to the cell saying, I don't have enough ATP. So then the cell goes into like trying to preserve energy. So it's the same idea as exercise. So that's the whole thing of how it's supposed to work, because it's just like mimicking you doing exercise.
So one of the internet bros like to call them stacks. So for these longevity stacks, a very reasonable thing. If you take what you're saying, which mimics a lot of David Sinclair, Dr. Sinclair, who's not a medical doctor, but a nice researcher out of Harvard, has been a proponent of metformin for many, many years and taking it himself. You throw in that stack, if you will, talking about ATP with creatine, which many others have realized the cognitive improvement of creatine. I know Huberman's a huge creatine enthusiast, particularly at a steady state days, like a 5-gram dose a day, which I've been taking. I find it to be exciting. Very good risk benefit, very low. If I don't know of any
side effects
that are coming from creatine. I'm sure there maybe down the line when millions and millions of people take it, there may find some, but so far so good. So you got your metformin that, you know, along with creatine, helping to keep your cognition, because what you do not want to get to a point where you're forgetful and then think, I'm going to improve my memory. I haven't seen a lot of that. I have seen people that have done things to keep their memory strong.
Yes. Yeah.
So you really cannot wait.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, our listeners, like, you cannot wait till you're like me, 60, you really probably want to start in your 40s and 50s and make sure that your stack is optimized so that you don't have that.
Yes.
Trying to regress things. You don't know how frequently I get as a cardiologist, people are like, well, what can I do to regress or pull back my coronary disease? I'm like, that's really hard to show. We can go to particular areas and arteries, but to actually make your arteries younger, the best way is to treat it before it happens, which is your specialty, and what we're all becoming more and more focused on decades earlier.
Yes.
So people that are listening to this that are in their 40s are smart. It's not easy to be smart before you have something, but it is better to put that seatbelt on before you get into the crash, because it doesn't help you so much after you're in the crash.
Exactly. That,
So, so metformin being used by guys like Sinclair, creatine, guys like Huberman, both non-doctors. So guys, and I say that in the non-sexual whatever, people like us are then supposed to debate who's the patient that benefits from it, who isn't, when do they take it, and what dose. And that's our job. And that's what we enjoy doing. So those are two of the sort of the stacking things that happen after you get the right exercise, diet, sleep in particular.
The interesting thing with metformin is that it actually will reduce your VO2 max. So timing of when you're exercising and taking the metformin is also incredibly important.
How so?
So where you're not taking metformin during intense exercise because it will make you not make ATP.
Right.
So then you actually start to decrease your VO2 max.
Right. So timing, not just the dosage, but timing of the dosage is very, very important.
Yes.
That's interesting because we've seen that with a bunch of new drugs. Some of the oral GLP-1s, the oral Ozempic, the oral Mounjaros and so forth all have timing-related things, which are super important to know, because if you take them the wrong time, it may be the greatest drug in the world, but it's not going to have the effect that you want, may actually counter the effect.
Exactly, especially with exercise. You don't want to counter the effects of the gains of exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. It is fascinating how this how our bodies have so many feedback interactions. So you take one thing and it affects the other thing, which affects the third thing, which affects the fourth thing. So you have to be able to follow that pattern to be able to maximize any little thing that we do. And that's why we need things like really good data aggregators and software, as well as enough time for each person to individualize it. And I really worry about what's going on where people are self-experimenting. I have a very good friend that does not want knee surgery and is okay with taking the BPC 157, which is, body protection compound. What a good marketing strategy to name that, by the way, body protective compound, But the BPC is a known substance that's been around for a long time. It's just the 157 turns it into a peptide, so it's a small chain of amino acids. So they took a little piece of a known compound that was thought to be good, also found by accident in gastric juices of
So
dogs.
A long time ago, they were actually selling dog
liquid.
the gastric juice, and they were drinking that
as an elixir. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That story is amazing, but in the end, it's clear to me that people are hearing these bits that they want to take. Like, for instance, the BPC compound, they just took a little chunk of it. So a small chain of amino acid was under 15 chain amino acid. So a tiny piece of the BPC compound, thinking that, well, that's the right piece. Let me use this as a strong anti-inflammatory that might actually turn on some growth factors in the circulation, and then the body will know to repair my knee, which I believe might be happening in some people, but I don't know what else it's turning on. It could also be turning on cancer genes. It could be turning on other things. So I'm very worried about it. And this is happening right now with a friend of mine that is a very, very smart person, but her risk-benefit ratio is like, listen, I really don't want surgery. I don't want surgery. I'm in her, I think, 60s. I don't want surgery. I do want recovery.
Yes.
There's nothing else out there. A lot of other people that have a lot of health and wealth are doing a good job with it. And therefore,
she's going to try it.
She's going to try it and give it a go. And all I can say is, good luck, because we don't know if that is going to work for her for the long term, or it could turn something else on.
And it might work for her, but it might not work for somebody else. So that's also the problem.
Right. So I hope she's under I really, not in my medical world, but hopefully she is getting good sort of objective analysis of the things that can get turned on, does genetic analysis beforehand, maybe a whole body MRI to make sure nothing else grows. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of follow it. Yeah. But if you're going to go off the grid, like there are ways of doing it, meaning off of known indications, go with someone who's following you and watching you and that kind of a thing.
And also to make sure that you're getting it from a reputable source, because I think that's also another problem.
Right. Hopefully that's changing. I heard that was changing in Florida soon, where it's going to be now made properly, right?
Where they can get it at a compounding pharmacy instead of the research chemicals.
That's an RFK
July,
thing, right?
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Because at least you have that. At least you're getting it in some place that's trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
And then you're being overseen by a doctor that knows how to look at some of the other parameters to make sure if there's something else you can stop it and or counteract it.
Yeah. To know if you're having any side effects.
Yeah. It would be great if all of this data would then be aggregated somewhere, and then we'd have our own little trial without having to go through all the IRBs and things we have to do. These big institutional review boards and millions of dollars it takes to run a study, that we can just aggregate this information amongst us, since we're doing it anyways.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
What we used to call those, there was a name for those kind of studies. They were called, oh gosh, I'm going to remember. I need some berberine.
Okay.
I now remember it.
Or some creatine.
Creatine. The registries. Registries.
So hyperbarics has that. They have registries because a lot of the HBO indications are what they're doing now. Yes, hyperbaric. Yeah, not the movie.
Right.
So they do, especially for the off-label indications. So like long COVID and everything. So they do have a registry for those, so that you can kind of log in your patient case and
those registries now can be much more powerful, because you have so much other data that goes with it, gets put into an AI computer, and now hey, BPC 157 is really working great, or my goodness, it turns out like every 50th patient is getting cancer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's happening. I'm saying that's what a registry does. It just allows you to register and kind of volunteer the information, and you hope for the best. So, all right. Well, that was very illuminating, and I appreciate the perspective on rapamycin, on berberine, on metformin. And those that are listening can ask questions. We'll try and get to them on the future, sort of podcast or our doctor's lounge and formal discussions. I had read a very interesting book over the long weekend we had, which is called The Body Electric, written by a very talented lady that really looked at the following hypothesis. We're, as hunter-gatherers in our kind of lizard brains, we are wired to move all day.
Yes.
And this idea of like sitting, even like we're doing now, a long commute, even a short commute, scrolling on the phones, scrolling on the computers, watching a long TV or even movie, is not what our body's set up to do. And it really resonates with me because, as you know, as a cardiovascular doctor, my major contribution to the cardiovascular database came with being the first cardiologist to understand venous disease, particularly superficial venous disease, and how veins are connected to the cardiovascular system in a way that we had never realized. I'm not tooting my own horn, I'm just giving you my perspective. I really always knew that leg swelling was something more than heart failure.
Yes.
And indeed, it's much more than heart failure. It has to do with our immobility as a species. And that this woman describes that it really comes down to after 30 minutes, you need to get up disconnect,
Yeah.
and walk around for about 5.
Yeah.
And if you do that, your entire world can change. Entire world can change. First of all, you're disconnecting from the screen. So you
Yes.
have she calls it the mind-body tech connection. So it's the mind and the body obviously work. They talk to each other. We know that the organs talk to each other. The brain talks to each other. The brain talks to the organs.
Yes.
There's real communication, whether it's through the vagal nerve system, the autonomic nervous system, however you want to describe it. But there's communication. You throw in the tech that's happening that's causing us to take in both information as well as immobility, it's a really bad setup. So if you can disconnect for 5 minutes every 30, it's not easy to do at work. It's not easy to do even standing behind a counter because
it's not standing.
Not standing. No, stand-up desk is that was a nonsensical argument that was made in 1797 the first time, where people were like, well, we've got the quill and we're writing and
we should be standing.
So they came up with the first kind of stand-up idea. But that was disproven in the about 50, 60 years ago with the stand-up desk idea. That's not useful.
Because you're not moving.
You're not moving. So standing up can be maybe even worse than just sitting if you're just standing. You have to use the calf. You imagine blood's supposed to flow from the tip of your toes all around to your heart. It won't be able to get against gravity unless the calves pump it north, pump it towards the heart.
It's your second heart.
Second heart. So to do that, you need to move. It can be, it's the ideal, the most physiologic way is to walk, but you could, pump your calves. But ideally, you get up and you disconnect because you're also disconnecting your mind from the computer, from the scrolling, from this kind of, even your posture alone, just being in one particular posture. It's actually better to be in a different posture. I'm not saying if you stand at that particular rigorous upright posture for too long, that's also bad. We need to be in motion. We are in motion.
Yes.
And our lizard brains cannot understand it when we're stuck. And therefore, every 30 minutes, we need 5 minutes of motion is the thesis of this book. And then it goes through all the what's the plural of thesis? Thesi? all the small underneath ideas from how to hold your posture to the thought process to mindfulness to breathing exercises, all the things that we kind of know, but it's laid out very well. So I recommend that book.
Okay.
I've never met this author.
That will be my next book I'm reading.
It's a lovely book. It's written for the lay person, but it underscores the issue that I've known for a long time, which about every 30 we tell folks that are taking long plane flights they can save their lives.
Yeah, by walking.
By walking. We used to call it the economy syndrome. It's all economy kind of now, but taking the long plane flights and being locked in can cause your blood to stagnate, a clot to form, and that can go to your heart or your lungs or heart, and you can die. And that's happened famously to sort of journalists that took long flights and lots of folks. So we recommend 45 minutes. I think it's probably more like 30 minutes. And you can wear compression socks.
Yes, I actually do recommend everybody to wear compression while they're flying, just because of that stagnation, and to drink. Make sure that they're keeping themselves hydrated
because of the dehydration that happens normally in the in the planes. So I agree with you 1,000%. I do the same, but there's nothing better than the physiologic movement. And then when you're not flying, when you're just at work, it is absolutely imperative that people every 30 minutes walk for 35, the whole day. You go to a movie, you got to do the same. And that's not easy.
No, because you're going to miss part of the movie.
You're going to miss part of the movie, or at least you're going to be disruptive. But that's a better way to be about it. It's a better way to have your body to function. A long dinner. Like, it's funny, I have my son, when he was young, we used to call him Electrico because his grandfather used to be like me as a kid, would just kind of take off everywhere. That's natural. That's what you're supposed to do. And to this day, doesn't love long movies, doesn't love long dinners. Naturally, his
he wants to move.
His body's instinctually in motion, and it is probably a healthier way of being.
Yes.
Now, sometimes societally we'd be like, hey, can you just concentrate here, kid? But he's learned to, it's better that he learned to adapt to that than the other, than becoming
just sitting
immobile.
all the time. Yeah.
And that's where we're going. We are going to, as these things become more ubiquitous and part of our society, we're going to find ourselves in situations where we're going to be much less healthful unless we have these countermeasures. And I think the best countermeasure is to stay with that 30 minutes, put it on your watch, put it on your device, whatever it is, every 5 minutes, get up and disconnect, do some deep breathing. So I like this particular breathing exercise for those that don't want to get too complex here. It's just you kind of take a deep breath in through your nose. Then when you're at your maximum breath, you take top it off. And then it's a slow exhale. And if you do that probably around 3 times, during that 5-minute break that you have, you're going to find that your vagal tone improves, that your general health and sort of mental capacity improves. And
then you go on to your next task.
Right. Yeah. And then there's much more than that. I don't want to make breathing seem so easy, but maybe someone got a nugget today. That's an easy nugget. So deep breath through the nose. Little top off, nice exhale. So many of us, so much data has shown that is a really good start to that sort of breathing exercise that can help. And do that while you're motioning. You know what? I heard a great discussion. Someone said, for every 30 minutes of scroll time, give yourself 5 minutes of stroll time.
Oh, that's a nice one. Yes, so stroll time. Okay, everybody needs stroll time.
A little stroll time. And that stroll time can be 5 minutes. It could even be, if you have to, you can take your Zoom meeting with you. Yeah. You know, you can even at some point put them on the meta glasses or whatever it is. But get your body to do what it's naturally used to doing, which is walking.
Because we don't have to go and walk for water or walk for like you think about God knows how many years ago, but you would have to, that's the only way you got your water.
Well, they said that the biggest disconnection of our bodies for what they've been built to do came, obviously through industrialization, but maybe the biggest spike was the TV. So we went from, if we wanted to laugh with other people, we had to go to the village square, if you will. We had to go together. We had to get together. So the socialization started to really remove itself, which also led to the sedentary behavior around the 50s when everybody got their own TV.
And everybody aggregated around the TV.
Right. And everybody, meaning your small family did, but you lost that ability to socially be connected to folks around that moment because you were connected through them electronically. You didn't have that need to go, and that you see that happening with with movies, right? So we used to go to a movie theater. At least it was fun to laugh together. There's a social connection that happens there. Now that's much less so. We're doing it on our own home screens. Yeah. Of course, the home computer and now the home devices, and it just keeps going. So we have to break away from that. That's why there's this big phenomenon going around where people like to touch the grass. Have you heard that one?
Yes, to ground.
Yes, grounding. Grounding. It's just we need that. So as humans, we cannot go down this pathway or we will self-destruct. And it's partly the mind, it's partly the body, but from our perspective is to just, cardiologist talking to a functional medicine specialist, the idea of we can't stop you from scrolling, but we can encourage you to stroll. So scroll for 30, stroll for 5. You do that, you've done a lot to counteract this thing that's working against us, right?
I completely agree, and I love that stroll for 5.
See if we can get some IP around that.
There we go.
But hopefully some of our listeners will enjoy that. Well, I think we've covered a lot of the fun things we wanted to do today, and I know it's time to sort of get back to the patients and our clinical duties. But it's always a pleasure talking to you.
It's always fun.
Always fun. I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners and viewers have. And so I want to thank everybody again for joining us for the Soffer Longevity Podcast. I want to thank again our sponsors, Longevity AI and their data collection systems that keep us all sort of in check with the patients in our longevity programs in particular. And remember, subscribe below, and we'll see you next time on Soffer Longevity.